Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Classics in Concert, a joint performance by the Ashville Community Band and the North Myrtle Beach Community Band. We're glad you've joined us for tonight's performance. My name is John Owen, and I have the privilege of being the president of the North Myrtle Beach Community Band. On behalf of the musical directors, the boards of directors, and all the members of these two ensembles, thank you so much for taking the time out of your weekend to join us tonight. And we hope you enjoy the program that both bands have prepared for you this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as members of the trumpet sections from both ensembles present a special rendition of our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest ensemble this evening. From Asheville, North Carolina, please give a warm welcome to the Asheville Community Band. The Asheville Community Band was organized in October 1979 as a concert band for musicians of all ages and professions. Now composed of over 90 musicians, this wind band truly represents Western North Carolina, with members representing 6 counties. The all-volunteer band ranges in age from high school to octogenarian and is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Their mission is to support music education and the proud tradition of community bands and symphonic bands music across America, and to have a great time together doing so. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium the director of the Asheville Community Band, Ms. Frances Shelton.
Thank you for that warm welcome. We are the Ashville Community Band. My name is Ryan Hargis. I'm the board president of this community band. We were very gracious of allowing us to be hosted here and doing this joint concert with you. To follow up, we're actually going to do an exchange concert as part of this, and the other part of this will be a Memorial Day concert with the Myrtle Beach Band coming to the Biltmore Estate in Asheville on Memorial Day weekend. If you guys have ever been there, it's a wonderful place to visit. We are, like he said, a group of varied individuals performing in this band together. The band has been formed since 1979 and is made up still some charter members still in the band. We have 2 with us today, and we're just very gracious to be here. Our main director is Ms. Fran Shelton. She is actually my high school band director, so it's a great experience for me to come full circle. She has a long storied career in North Carolina music and band direction. Her list of awards and accolades is probably longer than she is tall. Anyway, just want to say thank you for allowing us to visit and be a part of this wonderful experience.
We opened up with triumphant fanfare. Charles and I got together and we really planned this out. Last year I was down here doing the all-county band and I looked at this beautiful auditorium and I said, Charles, you got a community band? He goes, yes. I said, well, we got one too. How about doing an exchange concert? So this is what we've done, a year's worth of collaboration to be able to do this. We cannot wait for the North Myrtle Beach group to come and play with us at the Biltmore House, because that's an icon. This next piece of music, we wanted to do our next concerts in a couple of weeks, and we're doing a big tribute to the mountains on that concert because we've been through a lot up there, you probably know. You all probably deal with hurricanes really well. We don't have those in the mountains, so we are doing a lot of mountain pieces tonight for you. But we did want to do one in honor of our friends down here at Myrtle Beach, and this is a beautiful piece of music. And I know the Myrtle Beach group is also doing this composer. They're doing the Falls, but this one is a newer piece, and it's called A Ship in the Mist. So this is our gift to you. So did you all like your piece? That's a really, really difficult piece of music, and just like the other group's going to play, the Falls, they're really, really complex, very difficult, takes so much emotion to pull off his music. But we enjoyed working on that. This group, we have about 30 that are back in Asheville. We normally run between 90 and 95 in the group. So this is the group. We were going to practice early in January to put this group together. The first Monday, ice, no band. The next Monday, snow, no band. The next Monday, snow, no band. I understand y'all know all about snow. I love it. So we had a Saturday morning rehearsal from 9 to 12 to put this group together, since we have 30 others at home. And then we had Monday night, we did full band for an hour, and then this group. So I am so proud of these people, and they made this commitment to come to Myrtle Beach, so please give them a great round of applause. You just don't know, we're so excited to be here. Charles, I think after we had the storm, Charles was trying to get in touch with me. Well, I mean, we were, no man's land for 5 weeks. Water, electricity. I didn't really realize you used water in the toilet. I just thought, you turned on the knob and it was always there. And then I always thought the power, you turned on the switch and you always had power. So these ladies and gentlemen, they've been through a lot. A lot has occurred to them individually, and we missed 5 weeks of rehearsal in the fall. I didn't see them at all. I think we had 2 or 3 rehearsals, and then the storm came the 27th of September, so we didn't see each other. And when we did see them, not everybody could come, but the ones that could come, they go, let's play, let's not talk about the storm. I said, let's go. So I really commend these ladies and gentlemen for their commitment and their love of music, knowing what individually they've been through. So the rest of our concert, we're going to kind of do a tribute to the mountains, because when we do our concert, March the 23rd, we're really doing a salute to our beloved mountains. And this next one is very appropriate for us. It's a march called Mount Strong. This next piece of music, it really sums up what's happened to us. In Buncombe County, which is where Ashville is, 44 lost their lives over the hurricane. And I live in Hendersonville, and our county had 12. Totally in North Carolina, there was 106. So this is a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. And it was kind of like, after the storm went through, you went out and everything was just peaceful and calm until you started looking around and you saw all the destruction. So we're doing this piece back in Ashville to honor all of the people and all of the families. There's one family in Buncombe County, there was 11 in the family, and it was a mudslide. And it's just been a tragic, tragic event, but boy, the resilience of our communities up there. I mean, you all deal with hurricanes, you know all about it, but we do not. But I'm glad you had a little snow. Because we get that all the time. But this piece of music really tells what we've been through. So it's very powerful, it's very beautiful, and it's very moving. So we dedicate this, and also the two bands together. Charles emailed me and goes, hey, we got an idea, we could play a combined piece. And I said, oh, there's only one piece that's appropriate for us to play with you all, and it was Amazing Grace. So that's the last thing. And Charles is going to direct it, and it's so beautiful and so moving. But this is what we're going to do this piece in honor of Western North Carolina and the resilience that we have up there. So this one is Appalachian Morning. So I would just like, in this group, if you have a solo, or you're gonna play solo, or you just played a solo, please stand up and let us applaud you for playing great. So all our solos. That last piece of music is pretty powerful, isn't it? Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. But we're not going to end the concert that way because we want to end it being all up and have a great time because that's what we're having a wonderful time down here. This next piece of music, our trumpet soloist, I tried to get him to go to Buc-ee's on the way down. Because he's got a solo in the middle of this, and he says, I'm going to play it truck stop style. I said, that's great with a splash of Buc-ee's. Now, you know in the great state of North Carolina, we do not have a Buc-ee's. But you all have a Buc-ee's in Florence. Now, how many of you, band, you stopped at Buc-ee's on the way down? Raise your hands. Look at there. Look at there. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty exciting. I told them if they were going to stop at Buc-ee's and they were coming down, to let out an extra hour for everything. Our last piece of music, Go Tell It on the Mountain. It is so much fun. But before we do that, I want to thank my good friend Charles for letting us come down here. And we had a vision, and this is 50% of it. The next one is going to be when the two groups are right there, and in the back you're going to see the Biltmore House, and we're playing in the Italian garden. And there's lots and lots of people going through the house, and they come and listen to us. And it's on Sunday. If you want to come up, we really need to boost our economy in Asheville. Please join us. We'll be at the Biltmore House. Up to the left of the house in the Italian Gardens. The concert starts at 2 o'clock. We'd love to have you. We're having a concert the night before at Ashville High School, which is about a mile from the Biltmore property. So thank you so much. You are such a warm, wonderful audience. Band, we had a great time. Yay! They've been on their best behavior. Haven't you all? You've been on their best behavior. But I don't tell them enough, but I love standing in front of them, and I'm truly honored to be their band conductor. It's a thrill every Monday night to go in front of a group of people like this, and I know that Charles feels the same about your group, but it is indeed my honor and my privilege to stand in front of these ladies and gentlemen. So on behalf of the Asheville Community Band, we are so happy to be here. The first person that I heard from after we got our power was Charles. Are we still on? Is there anything left? We got a little bit. So we are so glad to be here. I mean, we're going to end up our program so you can hear the great North Myrtle Beach Band. We cannot wait to hear them too. Go Tell It on the Mountain.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we will have a 10-minute intermission while we change the stage for the second half of the concert. Thank you. We begin the second half of tonight's concert with one of the all-time great circus marches, which also happens to fit into Dr. Dumas's springtime theme for the selections in this half of the performance. Switching between major and minor keys to represent the changes in the weather, we present In Storm and Sunshine by J.C. Heat. And now, please welcome to the podium the director of the North Myrtle Beach Community Band, Dr. Charles Dumas. Composer Rossano Galante has written and orchestrated the music for numerous Hollywood films, and that blockbuster film style is evident in many of his works for concert, with soaring brass lines and technical woodwind passages throughout. In 2018, he was commissioned by the Erie County Wind Ensemble of Buffalo, New York, to write a composition that evokes one of nature's most glorious creations, and the result is our next selection entitled The Falls. Highlighting a waterfall cascading over rocky terrain, Sparkling wind and brass fanfares depict the water as it rushes forward before exploding over the edge. We hope you enjoy the falls. Into the Joy of Spring by composer James Swearingen was commissioned and dedicated to the Ashikaga City Wind Orchestra and premiered on May 27, 2001 in Ashikaga City, Japan. This descriptive piece in 3 movements paints a musical picture of the transition of seasons from winter into spring. The first movement, Winter's Fury, might take some of us back to January 22nd and that unusual lingering snowfall we received here at the beach. I'm sure those of you from the mountains probably find it pretty humorous, but that was a lot of snow for us. The second movement, Spring's Awakening, depicts new growth emerging from the snow and ice, while the third movement, Celebration of Joy, finally brings us out of the winter into the blossoming joy of springtime. And now, into the joy of spring. next selection, Connect Us, is inspired by the human need to connect with others. Composer Carol Britton Chambers states, "Human beings, even more than other animals, are inherently social and wired to connect. Yet in spite of how busy we seem to be, often even finding ourselves surrounded by many other people, we're not always connected. In fact, we can sometimes find ourselves feeling quite isolated or lonely." The beginning depicts a hectic, busy scene, but with brief interruptions of solos meant to convey feelings of solitude and introspection. As the first section developed, various other themes begin to join, such as the first lyrical theme by the euphonium and the bassoon, and a more positive theme by the woodwinds that seem to say, "We can all stand strong, we can stand together." The second section of the piece is a lyrical setting of the hymn, "Blessed Be the Tie That Binds," beginning with the low woodwinds, who are gradually joined by other instruments, building to an emotional peak. The final section takes an unexpected turn. Driven by a Latin-based groove, soloists begin to play new, energized versions of the lonely theme. More instruments join, building to the uplifting ending with a refrain of the hymn. Overall, we have more in common with others than we often realize. Even the feeling of isolation is something that most humans have experienced at some point. We are really never alone, because it's likely that someone has felt what you feel, or is even feeling it right now. Most of the time, trials will pass, and the sun will rise again tomorrow. But as we go day by day, it really is wonderful when we find commonalities between us, when we discover the things in life that truly connect us. next selection on this evening's program is The Hounds of Spring, written in 1981 by the prolific band composer Alfred Reed. This exciting rhythmic overture for band is in the fast, slow-fast format of the early 18th century Italian overtures. The composer's purpose was to capture the twin elements of exuberant youth and the sweetness of tender love, which can be found in the following excerpt from Atalanta and Calydon, written in 1865 by the English poet Algernon Charles Swinburne. When the hounds of spring are on winter's traces, the mother of months in meadow or plain fills the shadows and windy places with lisp of leaves and ripple of rain. Where shall we find her? How shall we sing to her? Fold our hands round her knees and cling? Oh, that man's heart or his fire could spring to her, fire or the strength of springs that spring, and soft as lips that laugh and hide, the laughing leaves of the trees divide, and screen from seeing in leaf and sight the god pursuing, the maiden hid. We continue now with the hounds of spring.
microphone down just a little bit. Thank you so very much. First of all, I want to say a great big thank you to Fran Shelton and the Asheville Community Band for coming down and making this event possible. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so much. Also, it would be remiss of me not to recognize all the soloists in that last piece. There were so many that I want everyone that had a solo in the Hounds of Spring, if you would please stand up. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Thank you so much. And all the soloists. Don't be shy. Thank you. All right. They're a shy bunch, if you couldn't tell. Very rarely do I come up to the microphone and read from the program notes, but before we do this last piece, there's a message from the composer that I wanted to share with you. As John said earlier, when I was thinking about this concert, the first thing that popped in my mind was spring, because I really wanted to do the Hounds of Spring, and I was chatting with Fran about that earlier. But then the fall happened, and we had started planning this almost a year ago. And all of the devastation that happened in the fall of this 2024, both across southeast, but the mountains of North Carolina were just absolutely devastated. And so as I was programming for this concert, I was like, well, we need to do something, and we need to do something that makes a statement, for them and about them. So I found this piece, and it's just looking through music, trying to find some inspiration. And I'm going to read a little bit, sorry about that. While in no way specifically intended to do so, I wound up writing a piece about the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. Rather ironic, since the piece was commissioned by the Nassau Music Educators Association on Long Island in New York. Upon completion of the piece, many in the area, including band directors and student musicians, were still attempting to get back to normal. Once I figured out the title of the piece, I emailed Paul Caputo, the Vice President of NMEA District 4 in Nassau County, and he sent me the following response. What's funny in all of this, I was helping a friend on the South Shore gut his house a couple of weeks ago after the storm had sent 7 feet of water through his place. On the way home that day, I was thinking it would be cool if the title of your piece had something to do with the victims of the storm. I was going to email you my thoughts, but I thought, who am I to tell someone that his piece should be about? I'm glad we ended up on the same page. And thinking about this work, it is not quite about victims. Rather, it is about community. The music follows a single person coming outside the morning after such a catastrophic event. This person is portrayed by a single note which opens the piece. Shortly thereafter, additional people begin to come out, one by one, portrayed in the music. The cumulative effect becomes apparent rather quickly. While the single original note continues to sound, the power and combination of all the notes around it lift it up and make it glorious, clearly resulting in something that is greater than the sum of its parts. I could not think of a more appropriate piece of music to dedicate to the Asheville Community Band, to Fran Shelton, and all of the people in the mountains of North Carolina that lost so much, from us here at Myrtle Beach and the North Myrtle Beach Community Band and the entire Grand Strand. We would love to dedicate this piece of music to you. So please, on behalf of us, we love you. Thank you for coming down and being a part of this, and we're here for you. In the lobby, you'll see that there were donation containers. Half of the proceeds are going to go towards the North Myrtle Beach Community Band, but the other half of the proceeds we're going to donate to the Asheville Community Band for them to do in any way they see fit to help the people up there in the mountains of North Carolina. Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to share the stage with Fran this evening and the Asheville Community Band. When we're done with this piece, we're going to have a little bit more organized chaos up here, and we're going to bring everybody together up on the stage, helter-skelter one way or another, and we're going to do Amazing Grace for you at the end. So please hang around for the big finish. So here is a wonderful piece of music, always united, forever strong. so very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. If you'll give us just a minute, let's get a quick scene change up here, and then we'll invite the Asheville Community Band to come on up, and we'll get things rolling. Thank you so much.
So I've got a pretty big voice. I'm not going to try to make it back over to the microphone. This might be the most musicians that we've had on this stage in a long time. Let's give them a hand. Thank you so much. I present to you Amazing Grace by the combined Asheville Community Band and the North Myrtle Beach Community Band. We hope you enjoy.
she's hiding here somewhere. Come on out, Fran. Where are you, Fran? Come on out. Where is she? She's hiding. Okay. No, she's at the hangout already. That's what I'm talking about. One more time. There she is. You knew I was going to drag her up here. One more round of applause, please, for Fran Shelton and the Ashville Community Band. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attendance this evening. Please be careful going home, and we hope to see you real soon.